Preface 1950. Worlds in Collision is a book of wars in the celestial sphere that took place in historical times. In these wars, the planet Earth participated too. This book describes two acts of a great drama, one that occurred 34 to 35 centuries ago, in the middle of the second millennium before the present era, the other in the 8th and the beginning of the 7th century before the present era, 26 centuries ago. Accordingly, this volume consists of two parts, preceded by a prologue. Harmony, or stability, in the celestial and terrestrial spheres is the point of departure of the present-day concept of the world, as expressed in the celestial mechanics of Newton and the theory of evolution of Darwin. If these two men of science are sacrosanct, this book is a heresy. However, modern physics of atoms and of the quantum theory describes dramatic changes in the microcosm, the atom, the prototype of the solar system. A theory, then, that envisages not dissimilar events in the macrocosm, the solar system, brings the modern concepts of physics to the celestial sphere.
Okay, this is Immanuel Velikovsky, who was the biggest hero in history, that recorded history, and went back and examined what was literally written, carved, chiseled, made into glyphs and tablets, papyruses, carvings and statues. He looked into everything and every culture, and he found the same story. We had undergone a terrible cataclysm, and he explains it entirely in this book, Worlds in Collision. Now, we are going to be going through all this, and this is all about all of these things, these topics. History, ancient antiquity, ages, cosmos, cataclysms, the Iliad, the Odyssey, the mythology, world, Mars, Venus, Earth, catastrophes, everything, Mount Sinai, the whole 9 yards is in this. And he was destroyed for presenting this. Now, so you probably have never heard his name. Now, this is an archive that his assistant is, I don't even know if he's still alive, but he set it up, and apparently this is in perpetual, hopefully in perpetuity, this will last, so he will not be forgotten. Because he would literally be forgotten right now. And most people have, you speak about Immanuel Velikovsky, they'll laugh, and they'll say, oh, that guy, he's an idiot. No, absolutely not. This is proven to be very, very factually substantial. Okay, what we're going to do is go through this. This is his notes. And again, I think I mentioned that his assistant compiled these, and these are unpublished, and they're very quick, and they're really great information. And he goes through the Hebrew cosmology, the planet ages, giants. I discovered mud-fossil giants. I had them pre-DNA tested, no question they're real. And listen to what he has to say. And these are his words, not mine, and not his assistant's. It says, the tradition of peoples all over the world quite unanimous in asserting that in an earlier time a race of giants lived on the earth. Most of the race were destroyed in great catastrophes, that they were of cruel nature, furiously fighting among themselves. The last of them were exterminated when, after a cataclysm, a migration of peoples brought the forebearers of the peoples of today to their new homelands. And that was 3,500 years ago. Now, the Japanese narrate that when their forefathers, after a great catastrophe about 2,500 or 3,000 years ago, came from the continent and invaded the isles, they found their long-legged, furry giants. That's what the Japanese report. These giants were called Ainu. The forefathers of the Japanese were defeated in the first encounter, but in the second encounter, they were victorious and apparently killed the giants. Now, Quetzalcoatl described the wandering of peoples of the Western Hemisphere in the 4 ages of the world. The age came to its end in the flood. In the second age, called the son of the earthquake, there lived the generation of the giants, which was destroyed in the cataclysm that terminated this age. The third period was the son of the wind, called so because at the end of this period terrible hurricanes annihilated everything. The new inhabitants of the new world were Ume and Sukulaka, who came from the east to find a foothold at Patuchan. Here they met a number of giants, the last survivors of the second catastrophe. See, they're the last survivor giants. The fourth age was called the Fire Sun, because the great fire that put an end to this epoch at the time of the Toltecs arrived in the land of Anakor. Put to flight by the catastrophe, they wandered for 104 years before they settled in their new home. Now, he's pretty specific about all these things. 104 years? How do they know that? Well, he went back and got all the information that everybody just laughed at, and he compiled it and said, this guy over here said this guy over here said that, this guy on the other side of the world said this, and they all correspond together. He drew up relationships. He didn't just dismiss everything and walk away. Now, also, F.L. Gomorrah in his Conquista de Mexico, in a chapter about Cinco Soles que están solela, wrote, the second sun perished when the sky fell upon the earth. Now, I can explain this. The collapse killed all the people and every living thing, and they say that giants lived in those days, and that to them belong the bones and that our Spaniards have found while digging mines and tombs. From their measure and proportion, it seems that those men were 20 hands tall, of very great stature, but quite certain. Now, those are puppies. 20 hands, I mean, pfft. These things were gigantic, gigantic. Now, the Hebrew scripture preserved in the Old Testament and the Talmud and Midrashim narrate that among the races of the world in the previous age were races of giants, men of great size, tremendous strength, and ferocity, who were destroying other races, but also were turning upon each other and destroying themselves. Then he goes into the book of Genesis 6:4, narrates that in the antediluvian time there were giants in the earth in those days. The Greek book of Baruch narrates that over 400,000 of the race of giants were destroyed by the flood. After the flood, there were only a few districts where some of them remained alive. When after a number of centuries another catastrophe ruined the world and the Israelites left Egypt and sent a few men to explore Palestine, they reported the people in the land were generally of tall stature, and that besides there we saw the giants, the son of Anak, which came of the giants, and in our sight as grasshoppers as we are in their sight. This description clearly differentiates between the people of a tall stature and giants, and all this is fully understood now. The supposition that the Israelites found in Palestine are a normal race only taller than themselves and thought to be giants is not supported by the text, and it's not supported by the physical evidence anymore. There were giants, it's no question whatsoever. A similar distinction is made in Deuteronomy. The people is greater and taller than we, and moreover we have seen the sons of the Anak, giants there. A few families lived in Hebron. At the time when the Israelites approached the fields of Bashan in transfer, only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of the giants. The other individuals of monstrous size had been annihilated in the meantime. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron, and it was 9 cubits in length. That's not big. 4 cubits breadth, after the cubit of a man. The text implies that all the time of the book of Deuteronomy was written, the bedstead of Og was still in existence and was a wonder for the onlookers. The giants were the remnants of a race close to extinction. Og was of the remnant of the giants that dwelt in Ashrath and Edrol. They were also called Emim, or the furious ones. The Emim dwelt therein in Moab and Transjordan in times past, a people great and many and tall as the Anakim, which also were accounted giants as the Anakim, but Moab calls them Emim. This branch of the giants was already extinct, but 2 cosmic ages earlier, in the days of Amraphel, king of Samaria, and Abraham, the patriarch, Emim flourished in the Transjordan area. So they were giants everywhere there. Now, the crazy thing is, by 80 BC, nobody believed in giants anymore. And the Romans were invading, I believe it was Tangiers. I'm not certain, but I think it was. And they were told by the residents there that there was a great tomb of their the founder of their city, who was a giant, gigantic giant. I mean, huge giant. And they laughed at him. They told him they were crazy. And they said, no, he's out there. And they went out and they did excavate it. And they found, yes, the giant was there. And then they honored those people. You know, that particular burial site. Now, I have giants 150 feet tall at least. The ones that I have here, DNA tested. They're on my property. I'm finding bits and pieces of them. I don't have the entire body laying there, but I'm sure it could be dug up and be found because the body parts are there. There's no question about it. And they are DNA tested, CAT scanned, everything else, the parts I could get into CAT scan. And they turned to stone because of this great flood. And the great flood was a hot water flood. We're going to go through all of this. And it's all in the Velikovsky archives. About 7 days of a tremendous sun-like object heading straight for us. So it was so bright, it was like 1,000 times brighter than the sun, they said. And it was so bright that it cooked the earth, basically, on its way coming in. Boiled the waters, literally killed everybody, and impacted our atmosphere, combusted, all kinds of problems happened. Floods, everything. The earth wrenched, all the volcanoes erupted. It's all in here. We're going to go through all of this. So stay tuned. It's going to be called probably the Velikovsky series, something like that. And we're going to go one little chapter at a time so I don't drag it out too. Well, I'll drag it out for a very long time because he has like 4 books. And these are just the notes. This is the archives. And he's talking about a brighter moon when the moon was bright. And at one time the earth had no moon. Nephilim, the giants, the deluge, how they did their astronomy, the worship of Saturn, festival of lights, the rings of Saturn, the deluge, all of these different things, the early end of the Bronze Age, the Great Rift of Jordan, ages of the Dead Seas, overthrow of the cities of the plain. Everything that was written in the ancient text that was laughed at, he recorded. And then he compiled 4 different books, all of which were dismissed by academics. And the first one, Worlds in Collision, they forced him to take it off the bookshelves because the publisher that put it out was threatened with never being able to sell any more books to academics. And they actually took it off the bookshelves. So that's how they respond to new information. And we're going to be going through this. He did get them published finally by somebody else, but it was censorship on the highest order. So anyway, we're going to be going into this and learning from what he actually discovered and the documented history, not the fluffy stuff that everybody's been taught about. Because everything I've shown, I could prove everything, literally everything that you've heard about history and about geology and literally about all physics too. Because electron flood theory says there is nothing but dipole electrons. We're going to be going through that too. Because you have to start from the beginning. You can't just say, well, Thursday this happened. And they had no, before that there was nothing. It was just on Thursday it happened. Case was closed. No. Something led up to that Thursday event. And something led up to the destruction of the earth, and it was the 7 days of, they said there was 7 days of light. And it just cooked the earth. And then when it impacted the atmosphere, it was all over. We're going to be getting into it deep. So if you like this stuff, stick around. Because this is reality. It's been considered silly. But you're going to see there's very little silliness here.